It's that time to rise and shine with us, Africa, as we are Channel Africa first with the African story globally. The team of Asanda, Beda and Ndoro will be with you for the next 3 hours, bringing you news and current affairs. Let's start you off with the news. It's 6 o'clock Central African time. We say good morning to Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. Madagascar's President Michael Randrianarina, who seized power last October, has dismissed his prime minister and the entire cabinet. Randrianarina seized control of the Indian Ocean island in the wake of a youth-led protest that forced out his predecessor, Andre Rajoelina. In a statement, the Director of Communications of the Presidency, Harry Laurent Raja Jason, said the President will shortly proceed with the appointment of a new Prime Minister following the procedures set out by the Constitution. The statement did not provide an explanation for the dismissal. Emergency workers from various agencies, including the military in Kenya, are still conducting search and rescue operations across the country following the weak and deadly floods. 42 people have died while homes have submerged and vehicles swept away in torrential rains on Friday. Nairobi resident Eric Gorimbo says his friend, together with a colleague, died while inside a car that was submerged while stalled in traffic.
They were retrieved in the car and seemingly they were just, seated in their chairs. The investigation officer tells us that he found them in a posture as if they were sleeping. There were advisories. If it takes for you to even condone some roads, right? I'm sure all of us in Nairobi know where, floods are prone. Why can't that be condoned? Those particular areas. We'd rather get home late, but we get home.
Guinea's main opposition leader, Silo Dalin Diallo, says a war has been openly declared on President Mamadi Doumbouya's challenges. This comes after Doumbouya's administration issued a decree on Friday that 40 party headquarters and local offices would be closed and used for their logos, acronyms and other distinctive signs would be prohibited. The decree said the parties had failed to meet legal obligations such as filing financial statements. In a social media post, Diallo says direct resistance to the country's coup leader turned president was now the only way to bring about change. Doumbouya, who is a former Special Forces commander, seized power in 2021 and won a 7-year term as president in December in a result contested by his opponents. Legislative elections are expected in May. Businessman of South Africa's Northwest Province, Suleiman Karim, has told the Madlanga Commission that he was advised to falsely suggest that he had political influence in order to recover money that he had invested in a police services tender. The commission investigating allegations of criminal infiltration and political interference in the criminal justice system. Karim has reflected on his encounters with attempted murderer accused Vusimuzi Ket Matlala. He says the meetings led him to give Matlala a $601,000 investment linked to a contract to provide medical services to the police service. Karim says the arrangement collapsed, and after failing to receive repayment, businessman Brown Mkhotsi advised him to tell Matlala that he had a close relationship with the police minister in order to gain leverage. Karim told the commission that he was unaware of the relationship between Mkhotsi and Matlala.
Brown advised me that in order to keep Vusi, I should inform Vusi that I have a good and direct relationship with the minister and his office. I advised Brown that this was a joke because I had no relationship with either the minister or his office. Brown's reasoning was that I should make Vusi believe that I have a relationship with the minister's office and that he would communicate directly with the minister's offices if, when, and required. Brown was clear that this was required and calculated to make Vusi believe that my involvement and my assistance with the minister and his office would be crucial. And therefore, Vusi would therefore need me to pay me my money, or would need to pay me my money.
Lastly, expert analysis of footage and satellite data have suggested that U.S. strikes had hit an area in the Iranian city of Minab where scores of children were killed in a school on the first day of the war. It casts doubt on President Donald Trump's claim that Iran was responsible for the attack. The BBC's Maylin Thomas.
Multiple weapons experts have confirmed to BBC Verify that a US Tomahawk missile could be seen landing near the school, where Iranian authorities said 168 people were killed. Expert analysis of verified videos and satellite images suggests the area came under a wave of US strikes. Experts say this evidence, combined with the verified footage of the significantly damaged school building, makes the scenario of a single Iranian missile landing at the same time as these nearby targeted strikes highly improbable.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa CAF announces big prize money increases for the winners of the CAF Champions League as well as the CAF Confederation Cup, while Novak Djokovic survives a scare and qualifies for the last 16 at Indian Wells. Details at 6:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. Stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. You can listen or watch anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za. That's where we're streaming from Johannesburg, and that's also on the Channel Africa mobile app and SABC Plus, or via DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You can also catch us on our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook at Channel Africa and also at Channel Africa 1 and all the other platforms. My name is Peter Ndoro. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Asanda Beda. Thank you so much for waking up with us, Africa. And of course, we've got a packed show together for the next 3 hours. We are until 9. One of the stories we'll be looking at in this particular hour, particularly in our Africa Roundup, is South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who began a 2-day state visit to Brazil on Monday. And Ramaphosa leading a high-level ministerial and business delegation there. The aim is to seek to strengthen economic links with Latin America's largest economy.
And I'll be looking at a very disturbing story in the DRC where it's coming through that sexual violence has become an increasing weapon of war. 1,500 cases were reported last year, and you can believe that those are just the ones that were reported. It's likely there are many, many more. We'll be unpacking that a little bit more. But don't forget, Channel Africa is always first with the African story globally.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Weekdays after the 6 a.m. news, we bring you a feature of the show here on Rise and Shine. We call it the Africa Roundup. This is where we bring you a list of stories that you need to get in the know on around our continent and the world. It's compiled by our team of researchers, our reporters and editors, and it also serves as a way to throw forward to what we can expect to develop in this new day. It is Tuesday now, the 10th of March. So we start our Africa Roundup today with South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. He began a 2-day state visit to Brazil on Monday. The visit aims to turn long-standing strategic ties into expanded trade, investment and industrial cooperation as Ramaphosa leads a high-level ministerial and business delegation seeking to strengthen economic links with Latin America's largest economy.
We've had very constructive discussions this morning spanning a number of issues. And we are very pleased that President Lula and myself have witnessed the signing of 2 documents. Our visit to Brazil takes place against the backdrop of renewed conflict in the Middle East. We reiterate our call for the peaceful resolution of disputes in line with the United Nations Charter, and we condemn the loss of life, particularly the lives of civilians, and the destruction of vital infrastructure in that part of the world. And we call on all parties involved in this conflict to immediately cease fire so that the conflict can be solved through negotiations.
The United Nations has expressed serious concern over recent drone strikes across multiple states in Sudan. In West Kordofan, strikes on Saturday in Abu Zabad and Wad Banda reportedly hit a market, leaving more than 20 people dead and many others injured. Stefan Dujarric is the spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
In neighboring North Kordofan, more than 20 people were reportedly killed in the village of Keredim. On Friday, the International Organization for Migration said that in the village, more than 200 people had to flee their homes. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that yesterday, in East Darfur State, a strike on a fuel market in the city of Aduyan reportedly killed 7 civilians, including a pregnant woman and a child. We reiterate yet again that the parties must adhere to international law. Civilian infrastructure, including markets, homes, and schools, must never be targeted. Rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian aid must be allowed at all times.
Turning to South Sudan now, the UN humanitarian country team has expressed deep concern over an order for civilians, the UN peacekeeping mission, UN agencies and NGOs to leave Akobo County in Jonglei State ahead of anticipated military operations.
The order came from the South Sudan People's Defense Forces on March 6, and as of today, I want to tell you that our peacekeepers are maintaining their presence in Akobo and continuing to carry out their mandated tasks. Since conflict escalated in December, Akobo has become a place of refuge for people fleeing violence across Jonglei. Akobo is currently hosting an estimated 270,000 people, many of whom rely on humanitarian assistance for their survival. More than half of them are women and children. Last month, our humanitarian partners had scaled up life-saving assistance for both displaced people and their host communities. And our colleagues in South Sudan also warned that any military action in and around such a densely populated area like Akobo would put civilians at grave risk and could trigger a catastrophic humanitarian crisis.
Nigeria has appointed new envoys to Iran and Israel amid intensifying tensions in the Middle East. Officials say that the moves form part of efforts to strengthen Nigeria's diplomatic presence abroad, as President Bola Tinubu posts Salou Mohammed to Tehran and Nkechi Ofokuchwu to Tel Aviv. This alongside dozens of other ambassadors to missions around the world. Tessem Akende reports from Jos.
President Bola Tinubu announced the posting of Salou Mohammed as Nigeria's new ambassador to Iran, while Nkechi Ofochukwu has been posted to Israel. Their posting is alongside 63 others to represent Nigeria in various countries. The appointments come as the Middle East faces heightened tensions following military strikes and retaliatory actions between Israel and Iran and their allies. The situation has so far led to the deaths of over 1,000 people, including Iran's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and some American soldiers. Mohammed, a career diplomat, previously represented Nigeria in the Gulf region, while Ofochukwu, a non-career diplomat, served as a special advisor in the administration. Chasim Akendi, SABC News, Jos.
And that's how we come to the end of today's segment, which we call the Africa Roundup. And we'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. Coming up shortly, Asanda will be taking us to East Africa to find out what's been happening in the region.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's Tuesday, so we take a look at what's happening in the region of East Africa here on Rise and Shine. We do that with our resident analyst, Dennis Mberu, who is East Africa region journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya. Dennis, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Asanda, Beda. I'm good. I hope you are well.
Well, thanks. But we start off with horrible news then. What's happening in Kenya there where you are? In Nairobi, we heard of floods there that killed at least 23 people. The figure was last week. That figure has now risen to more than almost double, 42.
Yes, Asanda, Beda. This is according to the Special Program Minister, Geoffrey Ruku, who told the reporters on Sunday that police had documented 42 bodies since then, including 26 in the capital, Nairobi. Police said the deaths were reported in multiple counties as torrential rains battered large parts of the country over the weekend, flooding roads and disrupting transport and daily activities in several towns. The flood has also done intensive damage to the infrastructure and livelihood. In Nairobi alone, Asanda, we saw flood waters are swept through high and low-lying, neighborhoods and the informal settlement, submerging homes and carrying away vehicles as river overflowed their banks. And that's not alone. We also saw the Kenya Airways said that the rain had disrupted flights to Nairobi, and they had to force some to divert to the coastal city over Mombasa. And on Saturday, aid workers pulled bodies from flood waters across the capital. And President William Ruto said he had deployed a team of emergency responders, including soldiers, to coordinate rescue efforts while offering condolences to the affected families. And it is evident that what really happened on Friday, and as of yesterday, some bodies were retrieved from Nairobi River.
As you say, the President, William Ruto, has released some emergency reserves that the country had to assist those who are affected and some kind of humanitarian aid over and above the deployment of army personnel. But ultimately, this boils down to climate change issues, and East Africa has been battling these in recent times. So what contingency does Kenya have then? Because seemingly this might spread and it might continue. We might see or be talking about this next year as well. Are there plans in place to mitigate against these climate change challenges?
Thank you, Asanda. Of course, yes, Kenya is really trying to ensure that they are now mitigating for this climate, change. And the scientists say the global warming is worsening floods and drought across East Africa. And President through the governor of Nairobi, which was really affected by these floods, he was quoted saying that they are planning to put up some measures to ensure that this is not happening again. And remember, Asanda, the last time Kenya had, heavy rains, the El Nino rains, that was back in 1997, where we saw infrastructure damaged and quite a number of people died. And since then, the country had, or a government had not, ensured that they are prepared in case of an emergency like that. And we have also seen this. And there have been forums where people have been educated on how to ensure that they are ready in case of any climatic changes. And there are also reports that government is going to set aside some funds to ensure that they are tackling these in case it happens again.
Okay, let's move to Madagascar now, where the president there, okay, I have to focus when I say these Madagascan surnames, Randrianirina. So he's dismissed his entire cabinet as well as the prime minister, and this was said by a spokesperson of the presidency, or I think they call it a communications lead in the presidency. But it didn't give any reasons why or why these dismissals have happened. Why do you think that is? That there's no reason given?
Yes, just a few months after seizing power in October last year and dismissing the prime minister and the entire cabinet on Monday. It's so strange because he has not given any reasons why he has done so. And according to the director of communications of the president, that is Harry Laurent Rahajason, who said, of course, that there are no reasons why president had to dismiss the prime minister and the entire cabinet. But the sources say that, of course, the government is trying to ensure that they are now coming up, with new faces, because we have seen this is most of the ministers who are now who have been dismissed. They were in the past regime, and just this is part of trying to ensure that, of course, we are coming up with the new faces, with the new regime. And probably before the end of this week, we will get, more information whether a new prime minister will be appointed and a new cabinet will be announced.
Well, him coming into power in the first place, just now in October of last year, Randrianirina, meant that the previous president, Rajoelina, was removed from power. But he himself seemed to be a young president, a fresh face for the country, Madagascar, where young people were calling for that. But that still didn't seem satisfactory, because then young people took to the streets again to protest that there wasn't much change. This change now, do you think it's going to make a difference?
Of course, young people are now happy because you see, Asanda Beda, just doing away with the entire cabinet and, of course, the prime minister. That is a very huge, a change for the Madagascar Malagasi's, and it is not enough. We have to see the new faces, the young people in the cabinet, because young people, their call was, we need a regime change. And now the regime change is here. And we are waiting to see whether this will really be affected, if young people will be included in the cabinet, because the Malagasy leadership, really focused, on the old guards. And now we are seeing a young prime minister, a young president, and of course we want to see young leaders being appointed to steer the economy of Madagascar.
All right, to Tanzania now. Good news for the country as well as the region, that for health at least, there is a neonatal care unit that's being installed there, I think one of the largest ever. And this is part of 100 other ones that will be installed across the continent. How is this news? It's good news, but how is it being received in Tanzania?
Yes, Asanda, this is good news to the Tanzanians because these are major step in ensuring that there is a reduction in newborn death, particularly in the rural areas. And the additional of 100 high-quality neonatal intensive care units across Africa. And remember, this is equipped with solar-powered technology and specialized neonatal beds. The facility is expected to help save around 1,300 babies each year. And the doctors at the unit will now focus mainly on a complication linked to premature death. The center will also support kangaroo mothers' care, allowing mothers to remain close to their infants, a practice known to improve survival chances for the fragile and newborns. And the official says the units comes at a critical time as a country continue to grapple with high mortality rates during the first 28 days of life, most vulnerable periods for the newborns. And remember, this project is part of an initiative worth about 830,000 US dollar aim at strengthening specialized healthcare services in under-deserved communities in Tanzania.
Great news, and we understand that founder of this project is U.S. singer and songwriter Alicia Keys. Were there any other partnerships that we might not know of that were involved?
Of course, the government of Tanzania during the campaign for the presidential election in Tanzania, Samia Suluhu, the president, really talked about how to ensure that the country is acquiring more or is having more neonatal clinics in the country, especially in the rural areas. So the government of Samia Suluhu Hassan is also part of this initiative, and this is now courtesy of the singer. And there are plans to also have these more in some part of Tanzania to ensure that, of course, the death, of the newborn in Tanzania is reduced.
All right. So Malawi and Ghana, this might be our final discussion story because of time, but they're now entering into discussions about digital infrastructure transformation for both their countries. Has there been an MOU signed, or is it still discussion phase at this point?
MOU has not yet been signed, but the two agreed to strengthen cooperation, digital development following the discussion between the two ministers for the ICT on the sideline of the Mobile World Congress 2026 in Barcelona, Spain. That is Shadrach Namalomba, the Malawi Minister for Information and Communication Technology, meeting with Samuel Natey George, the Ghana's Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovation, and they explored ways of advancing digital technology in their respective countries. And remember, during the two meetings, the two agreed to strengthen collaboration through exchange visits that will allow the two nations to share expertise in the information and communication technology, ICT. And Asanda, remember, this is just initiative is expected to facilitate knowledge transfer and support development to stronger digital ecosystem in both countries. And the two also agreed to exchange documentation outlining progress in digital infrastructure development as part of efforts to enhance cooperation and accelerate digital transformation in Burundi and Ghana.
Are they on par when it comes to digital infrastructure, these countries? Why would they choose to work together? I'm just interested. Ghana and Malawi, are they on the same level? And also, what are the timeframes that they have put in place to make this a success?
Yes, they are really trying to ensure that, digital, they are at par. But remember, Burundi is still struggling. Probably now, Ghana is a bit, advanced in terms of, technological advancement. And there are no specific, timelines for this partnership. But I think once the documentation is shared between the two countries, we'll be able to learn how long the collaboration and the cooperation will last.
Dennis, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Always great catching up with you. We'll chat again next week, Tuesday.
Asante sana, Asanda.
Asante sana. Dennis Peru is a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism Kenya, bringing us our East Africa wrap. He joins us on Tuesday, so be sure to check him out next week, Tuesday. I love this neonatal care units being built story, especially coming after International Women's Day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Starting this week off with that.
Especially given the level of unnecessary death at natal times. I mean, it's a relief to get some help. They should have been there all along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A good African story there. It's 6:30 Central African time. We get our news headlines. Here's Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Madagascar's President Michael Randrianarina, who seized power last October, has dismissed his Prime Minister and the entire cabinet. In a statement, the Director of Communications of the Presidency said the President will shortly proceed with the appointment of a new Prime Minister, following the procedures set out by the Constitution. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the period in which the Madlanga Commission must complete its work. The Commission is investigating the political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system of the country. And the US and Israel have continued their bombardment of Iran. Powerful explosions are echoing across Tehran. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
Right, let's get your first full sports update this morning as we say good morning to you once again, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. Well, South Africa coach Hugo Bruce has named an American-based centre-back Olwetu Makanya in the preliminary 30-man squad for this month's upcoming friendly matches against Panama. Now, the Philadelphia Union defender is the only new face in the group, with the 5 Africa Cup of Nations squad members missing out, including Batusi Obas, Elias Mokwana, as well as the injured Siyabonga Ngezana. The midfielder, that is Jaden Adams, returns after being left out of the Morocco AFCON tournament earlier this year. Bafana will host Panama in Durban. That's on the 27th of March before a second clash in Cape Town on the 31st of March, with the final squad expected to give a clearer picture of who will then feature at the June World Cup opener against Mexico. That match, by the way, getting underway on the 11th of June. While the South African Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, says those unhappy with the leadership of the South African Football Association must use the upcoming elections to make their voices heard. McKenzie made the remarks as some SAFA National Executive Committee members opposed to President Danny Jordan accused him of ignoring their concerns about the organization's state. The SAFA NEC meeting chaired by Jordan descended into a physical altercation between members over the weekend. Despite the complaints against Jordan, McKenzie says that as minister, he works with the incumbent leadership elected to run the organization.
No, I think you must go and see what the constitution of SAFA says. They can lay a formal complaint if SAFA is in breach of his constitution regarding matters of election. The constitutions of federations differs from federation to federation. Now, the term limits also differs. Some saying there must be a free and fair election. And anybody's got information of a not so free and fair election, you have a right to write to us and we will take action.
Still on football news, Neymar will miss Santos' Brazilian Championship match against Mirassol on Tuesday, with lingering muscle fatigue dealing a fresh blow to the forward's hopes of forcing his way back into Brazil's squad ahead of the FIFA World Cup. Now, Santos said Neymar's absence was precautionary, but the timing is awkward, with Brazil coach Carlo Ancelotti having organised a trip from Rio de Janeiro to Sao Paulo, that's to watch the 34-year-old in action. Sources linked to the Brazilian Football Association as well as the national team's technical committee says Neymar's omission from Tuesday's match was met by surprise as well as frustration by the federation as well as Ancelotti, who had hoped to assess the number 10 up close as well as personal. Now, Ancelotti has made it clear that he will only select players who are fully fit and can meet Brazil's physical demands. Now, missing Tuesday's match could cost Neymar a place in the national team squad, being announced on the 16th of March for friendly matches against France as well as Croatia on the 26th as well as the 31st of March. On to basketball news now. The Nigeria women's national basketball team has unveiled the final 12th player roster for the upcoming FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournament that is scheduled to take place from the 11th to the 17th of March in France. Now, for a team that has rewritten the script of African women's basketball in recent years, the selection carries the weight of both legacy and expectation. Now, the head coach Rina Wakama has largely stayed faithful to the core of the players who powered Nigeria to unprecedented continental dominance. Now, 11 members on the squad were part of the historic side that defeated Mali's women's national basketball team in Abidjan to secure a fifth consecutive Afrobasket title, further cementing the team's reputation as the undisputed queens of African basketball. Nigeria will begin their campaign at the qualifying tournament with a demanding schedule against teams from different basketball cultures. And finally, in tennis news, Novak Djokovic clawed out a 6-4, 1-6, 6-4 victory over 72 ranked American Alexander Kovacevic on Monday to reach the fourth round at the Indian Wells tournament for the first time since 2017. Djokovic, playing his first tournament since falling to Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open final in January, had all he could handle from the 27-year-old Yorker, who peppered the Serbian superstar with 16 aces. Djokovic made an early break stand up to take the first set, but the American had found his groove and rolled through the second set against a clearly frustrated Djokovic. Djokovic regrouped then in the third and final set, finding the break he needed in the final game. With the 5 Indian Wells titles, Djokovic is tied for a record with Swiss great Roger Federer. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Coming up on Rise and Shine, we speak about South Africa's government's 2-point retirement system, where workers can access a limited portion of their retirement funds before the actual retirement, while preserving the rest for later in life. That story will be coming up in just a bit.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Let's now catch you up with what's happening in the world of business. First, with the African story globally on that front is Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. South Africa's economic growth outlook is expected to continue the positive run when the fourth quarter GDP figures are released. Stats SA will publish the data today following a turbulent year of business, characterized in part by the impact of U.S. trade tariffs. Economists anticipate the fourth quarter reading will likely moderate from the previous quarter's 0.5% expansion. Chief Investment Officer at Magwe Fund Manager Smoke Masilela says improved market sentiment and stronger commodity prices helped support the economy in 2025.
And the likes of agriculture as well, we think they will come, continue to help the GDP, given that we continue to have a nice rains as well. Yes, we know the tariffs kicked in, but remember we managed to get some markets as well to be able to export it to, so that it helped. My biggest concern is that we might continue to see manufacturing not doing that great, especially if you look into our November and December manufacturing production data that continued not to be that great. So
now in East Africa, Kenyan President William Ruto says the country will use up to $155 million from an initial public offering of shares in Kenya Pipeline Company to expand the main Nairobi airport. Last week, the government said it had raised $82 by selling a 65% stake in Kenya Pipeline Company, and that proceeds would be earmarked for projects like highways, railways, and ports. It has also said that Nairobi Jomo Kenyatta International Airport is operating beyond capacity and requires modernization. The value of Uganda's coffee exports was broadly flat in January amid lower global prices of the commodity. Coffee is one of the country's largest commodity exports and a key source of foreign exchange. Uganda is Africa's largest exporter of the beans. In January, Uganda earned $161 million from its coffee shipments, 1.5% higher than shipments in the same period last year. African nations, many reliant on oil imports, are feeling the effects of shipping disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. The South African rand and the Egyptian pound have weakened as inflation fears spread. The BBC's Shingai Nyoka has the details.
Thousands of miles away from the Middle East, businesses and consumers across various sectors are feeling the effects of shipping disruptions and oil price rises. In Zimbabwe, fuel prices spiked 25 US cents from $1.52 a litre. South Africa and Egypt's currencies have weakened in recent days as inflation fears spread across the continent. Ghana has been forced to stall gold exports to Dubai as flights are grounded. As the war grinds on, many countries are now making plans to weather the economic instability.
Meanwhile, governments in Asia have scrambled to limit the impact of the US, Israel and Iran war, which has led to widespread global oil shortages. Bangladesh announced that it will close all universities from today, bringing forward an Eid al-Fitr holidays. This is part of emergency measures to conserve electricity and fuel amid a worsening energy crisis linked to the conflict in the Middle East. The BBC's Anbarasan Etrajan has the details.
Motorists in the Bangladeshi capital say they have to wait for hours to get fuel for their vehicles, and in some places, petrol stations have run dry. Dhaka has already imposed daily limits on fuel sales after panic buying and stockpiling. Pakistan and the Philippines have witnessed similar scenes. The government in Manila has already announced a 4-day government work week to save fuel. South Korea has announced its first price caps on fuel in nearly 30 years.
In the markets this hour, $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 394, Botswana 13 pula 44, Kenya 128 shilling 31, Zambia 19 kwacha 208. BRICS countries $1 in Brazil 5 real 24, in Russia 78 rubles 79, in India 92 rupee 14, China 61.91, South Africa 16 rand 65 cents. $1 is 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $5,169, platinum at $2,188 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $92.88 a barrel. That is all for now. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
6:45 Central African Time. We take a look at the story now. The 40th edition of Africa's leading food, drink and hospitality expo, called Hostex, is taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa, with today being the last day. This 3-day trade show is a key networking and engagement opportunities for suppliers and buyers in the food, drink and hospitality sector. Tutongobeni has more.
The 3-day biannual event underway in South Africa's Gauteng province in Johannesburg at the Sandton Convention Centre opened its doors on Sunday, March the 8th. The event is hosting exhibitions, cooking and coffee competitions, and industry talks. Guests shared stories with South African Food Stories podcaster Nikki Robertson that range from looking at alternative food supplies. Speaking about her podcast, Robertson says the stories are meant to inspire others.
Guys, if I create a podcast, would you like to be a guest? I'd love to share your story on the show and hope we can inspire others to take a step, go get funding, go to school, just get on social media and start doing something to improve their lives. And every single person I contacted said, just tell me where I need to be. And we've had the most unbelievable guests literally drop everything and fly up from Cape Town to come to our studio in Joburg. And it's been the most touching experience.
The event is celebrating 40 years this year with more than 7,000 industry officials, 200 plus exhibitors from South Africa and beyond. Countries represented at this event include India, Poland, Nigeria, Egypt, Turkey, China, Italy, and Malaysia. Lerato Nako is event manager at Montgomery Africa, organizers of the Hostex event. She says this year's event speaks to other markets' hunger to explore South Africa's market.
It speaks to post-COVID. It does. It speaks to the fact that the industry has been hungry to access the South African market because of what it does for hospitality and tourism. You can't separate hospitality and tourism. We are the gateway as a South African country. Our infrastructure allows us to do it, and I'm grateful that we are able to get to this point.
Meanwhile, Trevor Boyd, Hostex Ambassador and Operations General Manager, Food and Beverage, City Lodge Hotel, says this year's show is one that will give visitors an experience to remember.
I promise you, this year, walking into the show yesterday, I was filled with pride because it really, if you go upstairs, you've been upstairs. The stands and the exhibitors have really spent a lot of money, spent a lot of thought to be able to do good things, and it really shows. There's a vibe up there. Not that there's no vibe, yeah, it's different, because it's different stuff that's selling. And when you sell food and beverage, there's always people there making noises and enjoying it and that. When you're selling equipment, the people are a little bit quieter. But it's definitely the show for me, personally, has been great.
One of the stands include a stall by one of the leading commercial banks in South Africa, FNB. Omelele Omi Mbo, Hostex Ambassador and Head of Business Development, SME, Platinum sub-segment at F&B says they are at the event to support their customers to get the right structures.
And the theme for F&B coming to Hostex was getting your business scale ready from farm to fork, right? How do we appreciate and support the food value chain that helps get the food onto your plate from a hospitality to restaurant perspective, right? There's a small farmer somewhere who's planting the seed. How do we support him just as much as we support the restaurant that puts the food on the table? And the one thing we want our customers to get is supporting them, getting the right structures into their businesses.
As part of the small medium enterprises from South Africa's Limpopo province, Rose Matidela from M&R Boutique and Project says she's impressed with the number of orders they've received so far.
We manufacture fashion accessories and home accessories, from your bags, your aprons, your coasters, all type of leather accessories. This is my first time, and so far I'm impressed of the turnout from yesterday. I think it was so good. The inquiries, the orders. So yeah.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa has recently introduced a major reform to its retirement savings systems known as the two-pot system. And this is designed to give workers limited access to part of their pension savings before retirement, whilst preserving the bulk of their funds for the future. Now, as the new tax year began in March, financial services company Alex Forbes reported a surge in demand, receiving more than 140,000 withdrawal claims in the first week alone, with tens of thousands already paid out. Now, the development highlights both the financial pressures that many households are facing and the growing reliance on digital systems to manage retirement savings. Well, to explain what is driving this demand and how the system works and what it could mean for people as long-term financial security, we're now joined by Vicky Langer, who's Head of Solutions Enhancement at Alex Forbes. Vicky, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning, Peter. Glad to be here.
So, Vicky, Alex Forbes received 140,000 withdrawal claims within the first week of the new tax year, with the very first claim being submitted just, minutes after midnight on the 1st of March. And I wonder, what does this surge tell us about the financial pressures that South Africans are facing at this time?
Yeah, so maybe just to perhaps give some perspective to the numbers, there's definitely been a much higher initial surge in claim volumes for the start of the current tax year, being from 1 March, relative to the previous year, March. So, you've mentioned the number, 140,000 claims coming in on the first week. Compare that to last year, March, we saw just over 95,000 claims for the whole month of March 2025. So, this is very interesting to see such a high, quick demand going into the new tax year. So you've already alluded to the fact that people are under pressure. I mean, for someone to submit a claim literally 1 minute after midnight, not too sure if they're trying to get first in the queue, I suppose so. But it just indicates that, that pressure out there really is real. And I guess there could be a few reasons as to, what's driving this initial surge.
Tell us a little bit about this two-part system. Just explain it to us and why it was introduced and what it's being able to solve in terms of issues.
Yeah, so it's been an incredibly important reform here in South African for South African retirement funds. You may be aware of some of the statistics out there. I mean, about 6% of South Africans can actually afford to retire. So something needed to be done about longer term preservation. And at the same time, I think, everyone's sort of long forgotten about the COVID years. But if you recall, there was a lot of financial distress at the time, and workers really needing access to some of their retirement savings at the time. So South Africa came up with a balanced solution on how to give access to pension fund members before retirement, but at the same time preserving for the longer term as well. And so hence the two-part system was implemented back in September 2024. So it's been 1.5 years now since this new system has been implemented. And in effect, a third of contributions go to what's called the savings pot, and 2/3 of contributions go towards the retirement pot. And the 2/3 to the retirement pot is preserved and cannot be accessed before retirement and must be used to buy a pension at the time of retirement. Whereas the 1/3 that's been going to the savings pot, members have access to that once in any tax year.
One of the concerns, though, is that people may access their funds, savings too easily. And I'm wondering, from a retirement planning perspective, how significant might this have in terms of a long-term impact, being able to access this third? Is it still safe? Will they still have a decent amount of funds left after taking out this third?
Yes, so one of the key objectives of these reforms was to improve long-term retirement outcomes, and it does in fact do that despite the access to the 1/3. And that's because we compare it to the old regime, which was on resignation, members could take everything out in cash from their retirement funds. So every time somebody changes job, whether it's every 3 to 5 years or whatever the whatever the reality is for that individual, if they are taking out that cash, they're depleting the retirement savings to such an extent that, that the average replacement ratio is sitting at around 30% or so in the old regime. So under the two-part regime, we expect retirement outcomes for a new member joining the system to be 2 to 2.5 times better than that, despite withdrawing from the savings pot. So we could see replacement ratios increasing on average, but it'll take a long time to get there because, for everybody in the system, there was a protection of previous rights, meaning that anything in what was referred to as the vested part that was accumulated before September can still, in fact, be accessed fully in cash on resignation. So it's really just the contributions from September 2024 that's been going into the retirement pot, or at least 2/3 of that. And so, if a new member were to join that brand new regime, stay in it for 40 years, for example, and despite taking money out of the savings pot, they could still achieve a replacement ratio of around 15 to 60%. So that's why we're saying the two-part regime will in fact deliver better retirement outcomes in the longer term, despite all the focus on the withdrawals, etc. But what is important, though, for members to just remember, any money taken out of that savings pot, it does attract taxes. And so taxes have to be paid at marginal rates. And then in addition to that, it does ultimately reduce long-term savings. So another very important point is about contribution rates. So, people need to save around 15 to 17% towards retirement to actually achieve, let's say, a good retirement outcome at some point when they want to retire at 65 or so. And contribution rates we're seeing on average only sitting around 12%, 12 to 13% or so. So, if people are not contributing enough, plus taking money out of the savings pot, it definitely will affect their long-term retirement outcomes.
All right. So based on what you've said so far, it sounds like this has been a positive move forward. And I'm sure that many countries across the continent are busy watching the South African system. From what you've seen so far, though, what lessons do you think other African pension systems could learn from South Africa's early experience with the two-pot system?
Sure. So there are a lot of lessons. So I think the key thing was just being clear on what are we trying to achieve and making sure that the solution being implemented is appropriate and does in fact deliver the results that one is looking to deliver. So in South Africa, as I mentioned, it was very important to find a balanced solution, although it may be tempting to have a system that requires 100% of preservation in retirement funds. The reality is that it's not going to work very well for most South Africans, there is the reality out there of people needing access to cash. Life happens, things don't always go according to plan, and people do need to have access. So having that kind of balanced approach, having some access, but mostly preserving that money, does seem to be working out quite well. Of course, in terms of actually getting ready for a big reform like this, it's a lot of work and a lot had to be invested into systems, communication, explaining to members how the new regime would work, what are the consequences based on their different decisions. It's important for members to go and use the tools out there like calculators to work out the impacts of their decisions so that they can make informed choices. And and that's not even touching on all the legal
Sadly,
side
we've
of
run out
everything.
of time, Vicky. We're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much indeed for giving us some insights into this two-pot system. No doubt you're going to get loads more calls and claims going forward. But thanks for your time today.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Bye.
That's Vicky Langer, Head of Solutions Enhancement at Alex Forbes, talking to us a little bit about the two-pot system. Something to think about, but be careful.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It is indeed Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. We are first with the African story globally. The team of Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro, that is. Let's start you off with the news and then we'll tell you what's coming up on this hour. The second, that is. It's 7 o'clock Central African time. Good morning, Onele.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Madagascar's President Michael Randrianarina, who seized power last October, has dismissed his prime minister and the entire cabinet. Randrianarina seized control of the Indian Ocean island nation in the wake of youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor Andre Rajoelina. In a statement, the Director of Communications of the Presidency, Harry Rajason, said the President will shortly proceed with the appointment of a new Prime Minister following the procedures set out by the Constitution. The statement did not provide an explanation for the dismissal. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the period in which the Madlanga Commission must complete its work. The commission investigating the political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system will now submit its second interim report by the 29th of May, with the final report expected at the end of August. The commission chairperson, Justice Mbuyiseni Madlanga, requested the extension due to a number of people who were still to appear. Ramaphosa appointed the three-member commission last year following allegations by the Lieutenant General Ntamkhwanazi on the infiltration of the police by criminal syndicates. Emergency workers from various agencies, including the military in Kenya, are still conducting search and rescue operations across the country following the weekend's deadly floods. 42 people have died while homes were submerged and vehicles swept away in torrential rains on Friday. Nairobi resident Eric Gorimbo says his friend, together with a colleague, died while inside a car that was submerged while stalled in traffic.
They were retrieved in the car and seemingly they were just, seated in their chairs. Somebody, the investigation officer tells us that he found them in a posture as if they were sleeping. There were advisories. If it takes for you to even condone some roads, right? I'm sure all of us in Nairobi know where, floods are prone. Why can't that be condoned? Those particular areas. We'd rather get home late, but we get home.
Guinea's main opposition leader, Celia Diallo, says a war has been openly declared on President Mamadi Doumbouya's challengers. This comes after Doumbouya's administration issued a decree on Friday that 40 party headquarters and local offices would be closed and use of their logos, acronyms and other distinctive signs would be prohibited. The decree said the parties had failed to meet legal obligations such as filing financial statements. In a social media post, Diallo said direct resistance to the country's coup leader turned president was now the only way to bring about change. Dumbuya, who is a former Special Forces commander, seized power in 2021 and won a 7-year term as president in December in a result contested by his opponents. Legislative elections are expected in May. The US and Israel have continued their bombardment of Iran. Powerful explosions are echoing across Tehran. Iran has been retaliating, firing missiles and drones against Israel and its Gulf neighbors, including Bahrain, which has reported another fatality. Ibrahim Isa al-Abbasi is from the Bahrain National Communications Center.
According to the latest statistics issued by the Bahrain Defense Force, 102 missiles and 171 drones that have tried to target the country's airspace have been intercepted and destroyed since these attacks first began. During just the past few hours, 7 missiles and 7 drones have been intercepted and destroyed.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Hugo Bruce names a 38-man preliminary squad for Panama friendlies set for later on this month, while CAF announces big price increases for the CAF as well as the CAF Champions League and the Confederation Cup. I'll tell you more at 7:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
We enter the second hour now of Rise and Shine. Thank you for choosing us to wake up with Africa and, of course, stay connected with the Africa and the world with Channel Africa. It is the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. You can watch us and listen to us anytime, anywhere via channelafrica.co.za, the Channel Africa app, the SABC Plus app, as well as the DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. Get in touch with us on social media. Firstly, Facebook is Channel Africa, and then all the other social media platforms, the handles are at Channel Africa 1. Channel Africa is first with the African story globally. And one of the stories we'll be looking at in this hour is the rise in global oil prices. And of course, this being triggered by the ongoing war or tensions in the Middle East, and this sending shockwaves waves through African economies. We speak about how broader economic pressures across Africa are impacting on inflation, transport costs, and other things. We'll be speaking to Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Very good morning to you, Asanda.
Morning. Good morning.
Yeah, look, some pretty tough stories that we're looking at this hour. We're going to be going to investigate and see a little bit more about continued sexual violence in the east of the DRC in particular. This is the weaponizing of sexual violence during war by some of the belligerents, and we'll be unpacking that this hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Rising global prices, triggered by ongoing tensions in the Middle East, are sending shockwaves through African economies. Many countries on the continent rely heavily on imported fuel, leaving households and businesses vulnerable to higher costs. To discuss the potential impact on inflation, transport costs, and broader economic pressures across Africa, we're joined this morning by Dr. Azar Jamin, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics. Doctor, thank you for joining us. Always great having these catch-up sessions with you and getting your analysis. Good morning.
Good morning to you and to your viewers.
So, to start off with, how worrying is this recent surge in oil prices, particularly for African economies that rely heavily on imported fuel?
It is very worrisome, especially if oil prices remain at their current elevated levels. It's going to cause a significant increase in inflation, and there's also going to be a relative shortage of fuel. And as a consequence, I think there is a good chance that the world economy will be weaker than anticipated. Worst case scenario, that it will go into a full-scale recession. Best case scenario, though, will be that it will be saddled with higher inflation, and interest rates will not be able to come down as much as had been anticipated.
So let's talk about the link between currencies and fuel prices. We've heard a lot about currencies being under pressure when oil prices are up. Can you explain how that works and why it matters to everyday people?
It's, they need not actually depreciate when oil prices rise. But what actually happens is that when oil prices rise, sentiment on global financial markets tends to turn negative. When it turns negative, one of the things that happens is that investors put their money into the perceived safe haven of the dollar and sell other currencies, especially in the case of emerging markets. And so emerging market currencies tend to weaken when you get a negative vibe on global financial markets. It's as simple as that.
And as we speak of everyday people, what are we likely to see then in terms of higher costs when it comes to transport and food?
When it comes to transport, I mean, the simple calculation says that with the oil price currently around 50% higher than it was a couple of months ago, and with the possibility or likelihood that countries' currencies will have depreciated, you are likely to end up seeing fuel prices considerably higher than they were a couple of months ago. The extent to which they will rise depends on the extent to which the basic cost of oil forms part of the fuel price. For example, in South Africa, the basic fuel price of R8.66 per litre currently is just over 40% of the final cost of fuel of R20.30. The balance is made up of a whole lot of levies and allowances for margins to wholesalers and retailers and the like. So what happens is if the basic fuel price in this case has gone up by 50 or 60%, it means the price of fuel will rise by around 20%. And that in turn translates into an increase in inflation of up to about 0.5% or so.
So as you talk of South Africa then, will that be the impact on the economy, inflation, and also what will the impact be on households here?
Certainly it will be an increase in inflation. And remember, out of the blue, you're now seeing an increase in your cost of living of that order of magnitude, which means that you will have that much less available to spend on everything else. If you spend 0.5% more of what you've got on fuel, you'll have 0.5% less to spend on everything else. And that obviously is a dampener on economic activity.
Some African countries actually produce crude oil, but they still rely on imported refined fuel. So how does that mix affect whether higher global prices are a help or a headache to them?
That's a curious and interesting conundrum that they face. Clearly, they will benefit from the sale of their crude internally and through exports, but will be paying proportionately that much more to import the refined fuel. On balance, they will end up having to pay more money out than they are receiving. But they are at least fortunate because they're receiving a partial benefit from the escalation in fuel prices. In other countries which are totally dependent on imports for all their oil, whether it be refined or raw, you are likely to see significantly bigger inflationary effects than in the kind of case that you've highlighted.
So where are we standing then in this new week in terms of oil prices, as from maybe if we make a comparison from last week? I know we made a comparison from last month of a rise in 50%.
If I can just briefly give you the numbers, at the beginning of the year, the Brent price of crude oil was just over $60 a barrel. Just before the Iranian war broke out, it had risen to $72 a barrel, in large measure because people had started discounting the possibility of a war and a shortage of oil, and it is now at $94 a barrel. So if you compare the current price to what it was just before the war began, it's up around 30%. If you compare the current price to where the oil price was at the beginning of the year, it's up 50-60% or so.
So let's look ahead now, Doctor. Do these developments make a stronger case for African countries to invest more in local energy or local renewable resources?
Well, what it does make a case for is, even if they don't have oil under the ground themselves, is to try and develop refining capability domestically. And one of the sad features about the South African situation is they did have a significant refining capability internally until a few years ago, and gradually that has dissipated in recent times, so that South Africa, for example, has become far more dependent on imported refined fuel than was the case a few years ago. For the rest of Africa, it depends very much on the country itself. There are variances, but generally speaking, they should be trying to develop more of their refining capacity themselves. And there is an argument for building up strategic oil reserves. Again, in South Africa's case, there was a lot of these, and they were sold off for a pittance some years ago by a very poor decision on the part of the Minister of Mineral and Energy Affairs at the time.
Your final thoughts then, Doctor, on this, so whether or not your opinion is that we shouldn't panic or that we should take steps to become more resilient in our African economies?
Unfortunately, I think there is a sense of panic that comes about. A lot will depend on how long this war lasts. If you are to believe Trump's comments last night that America had basically won the war and it was nearly over, then obviously the need to panic diminishes somewhat. But the need to develop one's internal refining capability is still an important prerequisite to become more independent of events such as these that are taking place.
Thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Dr. Azar Jamin is Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics, sharing his insights on how rising oil prices are affecting African economies. Of course, this with the effects of the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. And one only wonders when that will abate or leave us, I guess. And we are seeing different developments. Literally every week there's something new. And it's sending shockwaves through African economies as well as the world. So we'll be giving updates on that as time goes here on Channel Africa.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Conflict-related sexual violence remains one of the most devastating consequences of war in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The United Nations says that hundreds of cases were documented last year in the provinces of North and South Kivu, affecting more than 1,500 victims, most of them women and girls. Human rights groups warn, though, that the real number is likely far higher because many survivors never report these crimes. Armed groups, militia, and even some government forces have been accused of using sexual violence as a weapon of war to terrorize communities and control territory. Well, to discuss what this tells us about the wider conflict and the challenge of protecting civilians, we're now joined by Professor Thomas Mandrup, who's an Associate Professor at the Royal Danish Defence College and also Extraordinary Associate Professor at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Prof. Always good to talk to you.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning to the listeners, and thank you for having me.
So the UN says that more than 1,500 victims were caught up in conflict-related sexual violence, and that they were documented last year in Eastern DRC. I guess questions then must be asked, what does it tell us about the current security situation on the ground in Eastern DRC in particular?
Yeah, but I think it both illustrates the complexities and the vulnerabilities and the fluidity of the situation at the ground at the moment, where there's a competition for control, a competition for loyalty and from the local population on the ground, and also that, for instance, the role that the United Nations mission in Congo, MONUSCO, has played previously, where the focus has, amongst other things, been on trying to prevent sexual violence, and especially sexual violence against children and protecting children and child soldiers and stuff like that. Due to the conflict with the M23 and the government forces, the Vasalendo and other militias, this work has been severely damaged by war, and it's unfortunately a pattern we see in especially in the DRC, but also in other conflicts, that the civilian population suffers when conflict happens and when there's conflict situations, but also that sexual violence used as you mentioned in your introduction, that as a tool of war, trying to secure the loyalty, or not loyalty, but that people do what the rebel forces or even the government forces want them to do.
So you mentioned this use of sexual violence. It's not just a byproduct of war often in these kinds of conflicts, and that it is a deliberate tactic. What would be the outcome? Why would they do this deliberately if it's not a byproduct?
Yeah, but I think there's many reasons for that. One is to force communities into submission. That's one thing. We have seen it being used, and it's well described in the literature, and I've seen it myself in the Congo as well. Trying to punish ethnic groups that maybe are often linked to to other opposition forces. The whole story about trying to impregnate women from other communities to try to poison that line of ethnicity within these groups and all that. That is a well-documented element of this kind of conflict. Then there's, of course, the thing about being using women and or sometimes young girls as pastime for rebel forces is also very common. Also for government forces. So there's many reasons for that. But I think you can put it into these maybe three main categories. And then of course there's also the other side to this, and that women try to and people try to survive, and especially in very difficult circumstances. Prostitution and other things are maybe is a way to secure food for your family, and so that's also part of that, and that would not be necessarily documented in this. And I think it's as you also mentioned in your introduction, I think it's important to remember that these numbers are has a lot of doubt to them. Most likely the numbers are much higher because there's a lot of unreported incidences in this conflict in general in many ways.
And we believe that it's not just militia, that there could be government-aligned forces that are involved in this kind of sexual violence as well.
Yeah, and again, it's a pattern we've seen. I was in the Congo the first time in 2004, and I remember I was a young man at that time, and then I was shocked. I was shocked by what I saw. I was in Manima province at that time, a town called Kindu, where the rebels my militia had just left the city, and then there was, it was a nightmare. It's like a bad old Vietnam movie in real life. So it's a pattern we've seen and all that, and that's also why that the UN has for a long time, as part of its UN mission, had where they try to address this. They try to go into dialogue with the government and with the government forces, with the militias, also the government-aligned militias, but especially also the rebel forces. They're trying to talk to them about child soldiers, sexual violence, these kind of things. The government forces for a long time has prided itself about that they had improved, the number of cases and the problems they've had in that area, and there was no longer impunity within our government's forces, and they would actually prosecute soldiers that transgressed the rules of engagement, and especially also issues like sexual violence and stuff like that. But what I've seen is that when conflict happens and when we have a situation like we've had now for a long time in Eastern DRC, with the war and the fighting, and especially also the government forces being on their back heels for a long time. We see these kind of the discipline decrease, and we see the problems amongst inside the forces being very increasingly a problem. So it's a well-documented problem, and it was not under control, but it had improved a bit. Of course, there was such much a focus on that, and then of course the resurfacing of violence and the large-scale violence, as we've seen in the Eastern DRC, has meant that these kind of structures and the ability of a possibility for the international community, where in form of the UN and its agencies to actually do something, is much less, and that's why we see this. Can we stop it? There needs to be a lot of international pressure, especially on the government forces, but also on M23 to try to have a focus on that. I think a report like this is a start, but there needs to be a lot of focus on and pressure on the leadership to try to change these incidences on the ground, because it's again the victims are the local population, and it's really really sad, and it's a pattern we've seen over the many years of the conflict in the Eastern DRC.
So much of this violence is concentrated in North and South Kivu, where a lot of the M23 rebels have intensified their efforts. You've been watching this region for a long time now. Why is it that this part of the DRC has remained unstable despite all the international peacekeeping efforts?
Yeah, that's a big it's a $1,000 question, eh? And it's a sad one, of course. But it's I think there's many incidents, many explanations to that. I think people on the ground are tired of war when you speak to them. Remember last time I was in the Congo, my interpreter, he spoke to him and he said, and he was a bit younger than me, so in his 30s and 40s, he said, my generation is lost. We will never experience peace. My sons might, but maybe I can hope for my grandchildren not to experience war. So I think there's a fatigue in terms of war, and I've previously also said that this is a end game for what's going to happen in the Congo, because they're tired of war. But I think the problem here being that you've had the whole reasons around the regional interference, regional interests, who should control the Eastern DRC, that the whole story about Rwanda and Uganda and Burundi's involvement in the area. And the historic relations with that, we have the ethnic divisions in the which cannot explain everything, but it's there. You have Kinyarwanda speaking both Hutu and Tutsis. You have Nande and others. So there's the whole thing about who has the right to land. Issues that's not been addressed and solved. The whole concept of newcomers who are Kinyarwanda-speaking people, as people that originated 150 years, maybe more back from Rwanda and Burundi, have their right to be in the Eastern DRC? Are their rights protected? You have greedy politician, corruption, trying to control concessions and mineral productions. So just to mention, you have local warlords trying to make a buck of this, not having ambitions to try to do all that. And then you have international layer on top of that, strategic international actors trying to also talk about resources, because that's a factor as well. So it's just what I'm trying to get at here is it's a very complex scenario, and what started the conflict originally back, whether it was the royal push from Rwanda after the genocide, so the reasons that started the conflict back in the day are very different today than they were many years ago. Some of the same, but it's a very complex picture.
Thomas, I wish we had so much more time, but we could talk for hours on this subject. But thanks so much indeed. Your insights always greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Professor Thomas Mandrup, Associate Professor at the Royal Danish Defence College and Extraordinary Associate Professor at Stellenbosch University here in South Africa. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinsi. Good morning.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Immigrant rights advocates have filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the U.S. President Donald Trump's administration from ending legal protection from next week that allows nearly 1,100 Somalis to live and work in the United States. Madagascar's President Michael Randrianarina, who seized power last October, has dismissed his Prime Minister and the entire cabinet. In a statement, the Director of Communications of the Presidency said the President will shortly proceed with the appointment of a new Prime Minister following the procedures set out by the Constitution. And South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the period in which the Madlanga Commission must complete its work. The Commission is investigating the political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system of the country. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It is now time for our sports update here on Rise and Shine. We say good morning again to Musibudi Makura for that.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Now, CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe has announced a $2 million increase in the prize money for the winner of the CAF Champions League and a further $2 million increase for the winner of the CAF Confederation Cup. So the winner of the CAF Champions League will receive $6 million, a 50% increase, while the winner of the CAF Confederation Cup will walk away with $4 million, a 100% increase. So in the last 5 years of Dr. Patrice Motsepe's leadership of CAF, the prize money for the winner of the CAF Champions League has increased from $2.5 million to $6 million, which has been a 140% increase, while in the same period the prize money of the Confederation Cup has increased from $1.2 to $4 million, a 220% increase. The latest increases take the overall prize money and payments to African clubs to over $42 million per season, an increase of 123.4% increase since Dr. Patrice Motsepe was elected as the president of CAF. Back home now, South Africa, Bafana head coach Hugo Bruce has named an American-based centre-back Oluwetu Makanya in a preliminary 38-man squad for this month's friendly matches against Panama. The Philadelphia Union defender is the only new face in the group, while 5 Africa Cup of Nations squad members miss out, including Batusi Obas, Elias Mokwana, as well as the injured Siyabonga Ngezana. Midfielder Jaden Adams returns after being left out of Morocco earlier on this year. Bafana will host Panama and Durban first on the 27th of March before the second clash in Cape Town on the 31st of March, with the final squad expected to give a clearer picture of who will feature at the FIFA World Cup that will get underway on the 11th of June, with South Africa opening the World Cup against the co-host Mexico. Still on the local front, South African Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, says those unhappy with the leadership of the South African Football Association must use the upcoming elections to make their voices heard. McKenzie made the remarks as some of SAFA's national executive members opposed to President Jordan accused him of ignoring their concerns about the organization's state. Now, the SAFA NEC meeting chaired by Jordan descended into a physical altercation between members this past weekend. Despite the complaints against Jordan, McKenzie says as the minister, he works with the incumbent leadership that has been elected to run the organization.
No, I think you must go and see what the constitution of SAFA say. They can lay a formal complaint if SAFA is in breach of his constitution regarding matters of election. The constitutions of federations differs from federation to federation. Now, the term limits also differs. Some saying there must be a free and fair election. And anybody's got information of a not so free and fair election, you have a right to write to us and we will take action.
On to some cricket news now. Sri Lanka have appointed former South Africa as well as India coach Gary Kirsten on a 2-year deal following Senath Jayasurya's resignation after the team's early exit from the T20 World Cup. Now, Kirsten, who guided India to the 2011 World Cup title, will begin his tenure on the 15th of April as part of a wider revamp of Sri Lanka's high performance centre. Now, Senath, one of the country's greatest cricketers, will remain involved as a director of the centre, overseeing player development. Sri Lanka co-hosted the recent T20 World Cup but failed to progress beyond the Super 8s, sealing their exit with a defeat to New Zealand. And finally, Britain's Emma Raducanu says she must be more aggressive if she is to compete with the world's best players after suffering a heavy defeat at Indian Wells. The 2021 US Open champion was beaten 6-1 and 6-1 in just 52 minutes by American 6-seed Amanda Anisimova, who raced into the 4th round. Raducanu admitted the gulf in power and short weight left her feeling a little bit behind, and also stressed she needs to mix up her game and also rediscover her natural style. Having recently enlisted Mark Patchy as a temporary coach, coach Raducanu insists that she's focused on building momentum despite the setback, pointing to positives from her earlier win over Anastasia Zakharova in the earlier rounds of the Indian Wells tournament. And that's a wrap from the sports desk, at least for this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with the final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Musiburi, thanks very much indeed. There'll be more sports with her in the next hour for sure. Now, coming up shortly, we got the business news, but you know me, always trying to talk up positive African stories. And here's a story about a quiet electric car in Zimbabwe. Yeah, Zimbabwean inventor Maxwell Chikumbudzo has developed several experimental green energy technologies, including electric vehicle prototypes and renewable energy systems. Now, his work highlights the growing role of African innovators in the global push towards sustainable energy solutions and environmentally friendly transportation. So good on you, Mr. Chikumbudzo, Zimbabwean inventor, leading the way in terms of developing quiet electric vehicle prototypes. Stay with us. Coming up, the business news.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
And it's time now for your business news. And at the business news desk this morning is Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Money laundering and the financing of terrorism remain pressing concerns in the Southern African Development Community region, the SADC, prompting member states to step up their efforts. Central banks have responded by forging bilateral and multilateral agreements aimed at enhancing regional financial integration, payment systems and monetary stability. In a recent development, the Bank of Namibia and the South African Reserve Bank signed a revised memorandum of understanding to strengthen institutional cooperation. Spokesperson for the South African Reserve Bank, Yolanda Vacha, elaborates on the MOUs and bilateral agreements with various central banks in the SADC region.
And so the MOUs are then entered into bilaterally with various central banks in the region, depending on the need as well as, the topics of interest at the time. So some MOUs that we have with central banks would be about 10 years old. Some would be maybe even older than that. And from time to time, we then look at the MOUs and we update the agreements based on emerging topics such as, payments, anti-money laundering, as well as, resolution.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his Brazilian counterpart, President Lula da Silva, have called for an increase in trade between the two countries. Ramaphosa is visiting the country following his trip to the U.S. He said that the two countries needed to work on increasing the number of companies doing business in each other's country.
This visit presents us with an opportunity to in many ways reimagine a world of opportunities which is anchored by shared values and a clear vision. As Team South Africa, we are keen to rebalance our trade by growing and diversifying South African export or trade with Brazil.
South Africa's economic growth outlook is expected to continue the positive run when the fourth quarter GDP figures are released. Stats SA will publish the data today following a turbulent year for business, characterized in part by the impact of U.S. trade tariffs. Economists anticipate the fourth quarter reading will likely moderate from the previous quarter's 0.5% expansion. Chief Investment Officer at Makwe Fund Managers Makwe Masilela says improved market sentiment and stronger commodity prices helped support the economy in 2025.
In the likes of agriculture as well, we think they will come, continue to help the GDP, given that we continue to have a nice rains as well. Yes, we know the tariffs kicked in, but remember we managed to get some markets as well to be able to export it to, so that help. My biggest concern is that we might continue to see manufacturing not doing that great, especially if you look into our November and December manufacturing production data that continued not to be that great. So
the Motor Industry Staff Association, MISA, has expressed concern over the latest motor vehicle recalls, saying that the frequent incidents are deeply concerning. This follows Volkswagen South Africa's recall of over 25,700 VW Polo vehicles sold between February 2025 and February this year to correct handbrake fittings. Last year, VW recalled more than 250 Polo sedan vehicles due to an incorrectly fitted seatbelt on the driver's side. MISA spokesperson is Phakamile Hlubi-Majola.
MISA is deeply concerned about the sharp increase in vehicle recalls in recent years. While we understand the complex factors driving these recalls, we cannot ignore the impact they have on consumer confidence and, importantly, on the credibility of dealerships and sales executives. These workers, who are at the front lines of customer engagement, bear the brunt of consumer frustration despite having no control over the manufacturing processes or the components that lead to recalls.
Oil prices have stabilized and stock markets have showed signs of resilience. This follows U.S. President Donald Trump's reassurances regarding the ongoing fighting in the Middle East. The price of oil has fallen markedly from yesterday's dramatic high. Here is the BBC's Simon Jack.
The price of a barrel of oil smashed through $100 at one point to nearly $120, the highest level seen since 2022. Reports that G7 countries were considering releasing hundreds of millions of barrels of oil from emergency reserves helped push prices down later in the day to just under $100, despite no decision being taken. But prices are still nearly 50% higher than before the US and Israeli attack on Iran and retaliatory strikes on the oil and gas infrastructure of other Gulf states.
In the markets this hour, $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 394, Botswana 13 pula 44, Kenya the dollar is 128 shilling 31, Zambia 19 kwacha 208. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil 5 real 24, Russia 78 rubles 79, India 90 rupee 14, China 61 91, South Africa 16 rand 65 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $5,169, platinum at $2,188 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $92.88 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email, newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the period in which the Madlanga Commission must complete its work. The commission investigating the political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system will now submit its second interim report by the 29th of May, with the final report expected at the end of August. Ramaphosa appointed the three-member commission last year following allegations of corruption in the police service. The claims were made by the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Yesterday, on day 73 of the commission sitting, a Northwest Province businessman, Suleiman Karim, testified before the commission. Zara Groenewald reports.
On his first day before the commission, Northwest businessman Suleiman Karim told the commission he had lied to Vusimusi Matlala that he had a relationship with Police Minister Senzo Mchunu. He said he did so on the advice of Brown Makhotsi in an effort to secure repayments on the funding of a 10 million rand investment that he poured into Matlala's Medicare SAPS contract. Karim added that at the time he was not aware of the relationship between Matlala and Makhotsi.
Brown advised me that in order to keep Vusi, I should inform Vusi that I have a good and direct relationship with the minister and his office. I advised Brown that this was a joke because I had no relationship with either the minister or his office. Brown's reasoning was that I should make Vusi believe that I have a relationship with the minister's office and that he would communicate directly with the minister's officers if, when, and required. Brown was clear that this was required and calculated to make Vusi believe that my involvement and my assistance with the minister and his office would be crucial, and therefore Vusi would therefore need me to pay me my money, or would need to pay me my money.
Karim then detailed that while still waiting for repayments from Matlala from his initial investment, Matlala pressured him to pay 750,000 rand to businessman Morgan Maumela, who has been implicated in an alleged corruption scandal at Tembisa Hospital. When asked by evidence leader advocate Matthew Chalskelson why he would proceed with the payment, Karim says he did eventually pay 500,000 rand from his first payment as to not get caught in the crosshairs. This was the exchange.
Once I saw these newspaper articles, I did not want to get into their crosshairs. And when I looked at these articles, I said to Mr. Matlala, it's fine. I can't pay 750. What I'll do is I'll pay 500. I cannot do 750.
Why did you pay anything at all? This man owed you money, large amounts of it.
Yes, but there were more invoices coming, and he promised me that on the next payments he'd do good and give me a top-up on that.
Karim will continue giving testimony before the commission on Tuesday. I am Zara Groenewald in Johannesburg.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Across the world, the 8th of March is marked as International Women's Day, a global moment to celebrate the achievements of women, whilst also highlighting the inequalities that still persist in many societies. From economic participation and political representation to education, healthcare and protection from gender-based violence, many advocates say that progress has been made, but significant challenges still remain. In South Africa, women leaders, creatives and professionals gathered at events across the country to reflect on both the gains and also the work that still lies ahead. Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
International Women's Day
Marked on the 8th of March is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call for accelerating gender equality. Some countries celebrate the economic, social and political achievements of women, while others urge governments to guarantee equal pay, access to health care, justice for victims of gender-based violence and education for girls. Officially recognized by the United Nations in 1977, the day is commemorated in different ways in places around the world. In South Africa, various events were held throughout the country. One such event was the celebration of the world's most iconic doll, Barbie's 67th birthday. For over 6 decades, the toy has been known for breaking down boundaries and inspiring girls through storytelling, encouraging them to be confident, daring, brave, and legendary. The first doll hit the shelves in 1959 and has over the years offered broader representation of race, body, type, and careers. Karishma Ramdev, medical doctor and content creator, says the doll has had an impact in the lives of many young girls.
Barbie is a very symbolic thing for a lot of women that takes us back to our childhood and shows us what being a woman truly is about. It's not only about being beautiful on the outside, but it encompasses also being beautiful on the inside, showing people who we truly are, what really matters, our strengths, our weaknesses, what we pride ourselves in. And I think that ties into International Women's Day, where as women we come together and we celebrate womanhood and what that means to us. It can mean something different for everyone. To some, womanhood is being there for other people, it's being selfless, it's being courageous, and for someone else it's going after your goals and achieving what you dreamed of, and for someone else it's everything encompassed. So I think that they tie together beautifully, and I think that the event is on the perfect day after International Women's Day.
The event saw a panel of female leaders who are shaping various industries, impacting culture and redefining what is possible. Cleola Kunene, an investor, says International Women's Day is a day to recognize the contributions made by women.
I think it's still very important. Sometimes people think, there's a little bit fatigue, in terms of Women's Day. But the reality is we've progressed a little bit, but there's still so much that needs to happen. And for that to happen means that we have to take the time and energy to actually acknowledge where the gaps are and continue to collaborate as a female community and support each other, but also look at ways that we can solve the problems that we have as women, whether those problems are systemic or whether they are problems within ourselves.
Sama Clifford Kotzer, head of marketing and creative at Jenna Clifford, says women have overcome many hurdles and challenges over the years.
I think it's important to recognize how far we've come in society and what we are still, achieving to this day. And, just the women that I've been speaking to, we've got creatives, engineers, artists. There's just such a broad field of women today, and I think it's testament to where we are in the world. So I think it's very important that we take a moment to celebrate that, which is what we're doing here today.
Celebrated illustrator Karabo Popi Moletsana says in her line of work, she has had to overcome a few barriers.
I think one of the things that I had to overcome to get to where I am was imposter syndrome. That was one that played a very big role in the beginning. But what I realized is I can't have imposter syndrome, because to have imposter syndrome means that I'm emulating someone, or I'm trying to be like someone, or I'm feeling like there's a specific mold that there's already there. But since I'm channeling my own path forward and I'm doing it my own unique way, I can't have imposter syndrome because things haven't been done that way anyway. So for me, that was a big obstacle, and I used my originality and my own unique identity to overcome it. I think the second one would also be not seeing a lot of representation. So in a lot of the rooms that I was in, there wasn't that immediate connection of like seeing another girl like you doing what you're doing, and you guys have that like unspoken little nod and wink like, girl, I get you. So it was a lot of isolation that comes into the industry that I'm in the beginning. A lot has changed now, but I know like when I was starting out, even to the middle, even to right now, it can be quite isolating when you're channeling your own path.
The event was not just a celebration, but a reflection of the progress made towards the education, empowerment, and equal opportunities for girls while looking ahead to overcoming the challenges that remain. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Talking women's issues, guided by the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, South Africa is building a prevention to prosecution continuum that centers rights, dignity and accountability. The country's Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Sindisiwe Chikunga, said this during her speech at the opening plenary session of the 70th Commission on the Status of Women at UN headquarters in New York. The Commission's theme for this year is ensuring and strengthening justice for all women and girls, including by promoting inclusive and equitable legal systems, eliminating discriminatory laws, policies and practices, while addressing structural barriers. Showen Bryce Peace reports that Chikunga also affirmed South Africa's support in favor of the next Secretary General of the United Nations being a woman.
It's a session seeking critical engagement on strengthening justice systems and exploring best practice, often legal, in addressing gender-based violence, survivor-centered approaches to justice, and the role of women and advancing the changes necessary to advance gender equality and women's leadership. Listen to Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga.
Over 3 decades, in order to keep women safe, we have pursued a comprehensive approach that couples progressive legislation with practical survivor-centered services. We have strengthened the legal framework on domestic and sexual offenses, expanded legal aid and protection orders, improved specialized police and prosecutorial capacity, and scaled multidisciplinary one-stop models such as Tutuzela care centers. Over the past 30 years, we have repealed or amended discriminatory provisions and introduced stronger protections across the justice and protection ecosystem.
Chikunga also recognized that the ecosystem that leads to the full implementation of sound policies and laws has often been lacking in the fight for justice for women in South Africa.
We are working to eliminate fragmented case handling, backlogs and undue delays, barriers to legal representation, and any institutional practices that silence, shame, or deter survivors. We are strengthening coordination, enforcing time-bound service standards, and embedding trauma-informed approaches across policing, health, courts, and social services. Guided by Ubuntu, the Batupili, that is People First principles, we measure justice not by the complexity of our systems, but by the simplicity, speed, and safety with which a woman or a girl can assert her rights.
South Africa's Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, Sindisiwe Chikunga, ending that report by Showen Bryce Peace.
It's 8 o'clock Central African time. You're listening to Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda. Let's start this third and final hour with news. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Immigrant rights advocates have filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the U.S. President Donald Trump's administration from next week to ending legal protection that allows nearly 1,100 Somalis to live and work in the United States. The lawsuit, brought by 4 Somalis and 2 advocacy groups, challenges the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's decision to end the temporary protected status for Somalis immigrants. Your outgoing Homeland Security Secretary, Christine Noem, in January announced that TPS for Somalis would end on the 17th of March, arguing that Somalia's conditions had improved. This is despite fighting continuing between Somalis forces and the Al-Shabaab militants. Madagascar's President Michael Randrianarina, who seized power last October, has dismissed his Prime Minister and the entire cabinet. Radrianarina seized control of the Indian Ocean island in the wake of youth-led protests that forced out his predecessor, Andre Rajoelina. In a statement, the Director of Communications of the Presidency, Harry Laurent Rajakson, says the President will shortly proceed with the appointment of a new Prime Minister following the procedures set out by the Constitution. The statement did not provide any explanation for the dismissal. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has extended the period in which the Madlanga Commission must complete its work. The commission investigating the political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system of the country will now submit its second interim report by the 29th of May, with the final report expected at the end of August. The commission chairperson, Justice Mbuyiseni Madlanga, requested the extension due to the number of people who are still to appear. Ramaphosa appointed the three-member commission last year following allegations by the Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi of the infiltration of the police by criminal syndicates. South Africa's former President Kgalema Motlanthe says the current war in Iran is as a result of the collapse of multilateralism. In an exclusive interview, the former president says the powerful nations are at times abusing their powers. He says it is not clear what could have prompted the Israel and US to launch attacks on Iran.
If you follow the rise and fall of empires, you will always find that as an empire is coming down, it is always led by mad people. It's never led by people who adhere to and respect, the rule of law and so on. It's always led by characters who go to bed not knowing what tomorrow holds, and the following day they just wake up and do what they want to do.
Lastly, the US and Israel have continued their bombardment of Iran. Powerful explosions are echoing across Tehran. Iran has been retaliating, firing missiles and drones against Israel and its Gulf neighbors, including Bahrain, which has reported another fatality. Ibrahim Issa al-Abbasi is from the Bahrain National Communications Center.
According to the latest statistics issued by the Bahrain Defense Force, 102 missiles and 171 drones that have tried to target the country's airspace have been intercepted and destroyed since these attacks first began. During just the past few hours, 7 missiles and 7 drones have been intercepted and destroyed.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +7 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Gary Kirsten named as the new Sri Lanka men's head coach, and Novak Djokovic survives a scare to qualify for the last 16 at the Indian Wells tournament. I'll tell you more at 8:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
6 minutes past 8 Central African time. A very good morning to you and welcome to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. Stay connected with us to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. You can listen or watch anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za, on the Channel Africa mobile app, on SABC Plus, or via DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You can also catch us on our social media platforms at Channel Africa on Facebook and at Channel Africa 1 on all the other platforms. My name is Peter Ndoro. Good morning, Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, Mr. Peter Ndoro. Great to be with you for the third hour of Rise and Shine. One of the stories we'll be looking at is South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. He says relations between South Africa and Brazil remain a key pillar of the country's international partnerships, and he said this during a state visit to the Federative Republic of Brazil, which kicked off on Monday. Of course, that story and more will be coming up as Channel Africa is first with the African story globally. What are you bringing for us?
Yeah, so later this month, on the 25th of March, Channel Africa will be hosting the first ever Africa Matters Summit, and this is a forum for us to explore solutions for the continent. And one of the big stories that we'll be looking at and engaging with first is the issue of climate change, a continent that is the least contributor to climate shocks and climate emissions, carbon emissions, and yet we suffer the most. So the question is, how do we recover from this? How do we fix this? We'll be exploring that issue and more in this hour.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters. A platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says relations between South Africa and Brazil remain a key pillar of the country's international partnerships. Speaking during a state visit to the Federative Republic of Brazil on Monday, Ramaphosa told Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva that his leadership has strengthened the foundations of the strategic partnership between the two nations. He added that both nations share a commitment to equality, economic growth, and the eradication of poverty. Values, he says, provide a strong basis for practical, mutually beneficial initiatives that advance their national development priorities. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe filed this report.
South Africa and Brazil share historic and fraternal ties built on friendship, shared Africa heritage, solidarity, South cooperation, and multilateralism. The relationship is anchored in the Declaration of Strategic Partnership that was signed in 2010 and implemented through the South Africa-Brazil Joint Commission. Addressing officials, Ramaphosa said South Africa regards Brazil as a vital partner and values the continued cooperation and collaboration between the two countries.
President Lula, your leadership has strengthened the foundations of our strategic partnership. We regard Brazil as a strategic partner in more ways than one, and we value your cooperation and also collaboration on a number of issues and areas. South Africa and Brazil share a commitment to equality, economic growth, and the eradication of poverty. And these shared values provide a strong basis for continuing to build practical, mutually beneficial initiatives that advance our respective national development priorities.
Ramaphosa said both nations have not yet reached the level of cooperation and trade expected between the two most industrialized economies in their respective continents, calling for significantly stronger economic ties between the countries.
However, President Lula and I, in our discussions, bemoaned the fact that we have not really lived up to the standard that we are entitled to. As the two countries, Brazil and South Africa, should be cooperating at a much higher level. We should be trading at a much higher level. Our two countries are the most industrialized on our respective continents, and trade between our two countries needs to be much, much bigger than what it is now.
He added that the visit aims to deepen cooperation with Brazil in areas such as trade, investment, agriculture, energy, tourism, defense, and aviation, while also promoting greater skills and knowledge exchange between the two countries.
But we have both said that this visit is strengthening the foundation between our two countries with regard to further trade, further investments. There are a number of areas where we need to be cooperating and trading and investing and researching much more than we do. Brazil is a leading country when it comes to agriculture. We have a lot to learn. It's a leading country when it comes to energy. We have a lot to learn. In tourism, you receive more tourists than we do. We have a lot to learn. And in defense and aviation, you are much more advanced, and we have a lot to learn from each other, and we also have a lot to show you as well.
Ramaphosa also expressed heartfelt gratitude to President Lula da Silva for his support of South Africa's G20 summit hosted in Johannesburg last November.
I also wish to thank you for having attended the G20 that was held in Johannesburg. Your attendance at the G20 just lifted the stature of the G20. And I must say that South Africa was very pleased to be president of the G20 after Brazil, because we learned a lot from how you were president of the G20, and we copied quite a number of things from what you did. The most important one was convening the G20 Social Summit.
He also reminded delegates of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, calling for an immediate ceasefire and urging all parties involved to pursue a peaceful resolution to the conflict.
Our visit to Brazil takes place against the backdrop of renewed conflict in the Middle East. We reiterate our call for the peaceful resolution of disputes in line with the United Nations Charter, and we condemn the loss of life, particularly the lives of civilians, and the destruction of vital infrastructure in that part of the world. And we call on all parties involved in this conflict to immediately cease fire so that the conflicts can be solved through negotiation.
Speaking through an interpreter, Brazilian President Lula da Silva reaffirmed the strong fraternal ties between Brazil and South Africa, highlighting their cooperation through multilateral systems of BRICS, IPSA, and the G20.
South Africa and Brazil act to bring our continents closer together. We are partners at the BRICS, IPSA, and at the G20. We share the struggle of a more balanced and representative global order based on international law and multilateralism. This morning, we held a very fruitful meeting where we went through bilateral, regional, multilateral issues.
Two memorandum of understanding agreements in trade and tourism were signed between the two countries. Lula da Silva explains.
Today, our countries are signing two instruments that will strengthen our economic, commercial, and political ties. We renewed for 4 years the action plan for the tourism sector with the goal of increasing business and leisure trips between our countries on street directly to South African and Brazilian wishes. We have concluded an agreement on trade and investment between Apex Brazil and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competitiveness from South Africa.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Channel Africa will be hosting the first ever Africa Matters Summit on the 25th of March in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the aim of the summit is to engage and find solutions on critical issues of development on the African continent. This year's focus is on climate change, financing Africa's recovery. We're now joined by one of the panelists, Eliezer Goma, who's the CEO of Chedza Enviro and Planning Solutions. And he's going to highlight his personal journey, the company's impact, practical solutions, and the broader importance of participating in the Africa Matters Summit. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Peter. I'm very glad to be here this morning.
Eliezer, perhaps you can start by telling us what inspired you to want to participate as a panelist at the Africa Matters Summit.
Well, thank you. As soon as I saw the post and I found out about the event, I thought myself that was, I mean, it's going to be a great platform for young professionals to be able to really empower others. You know, what motivates me really is the fact that our continent is very young, and young people are also awakening, taking key positions in the industries, different industries. And that for me is important because young people collaborate much easier. So we need platform the likes of Africa Matters to come together and to be able to exchange our visions and goals. So I stand myself as a town planner between, or the intersection between urban development, ever rapid development that we're looking at in many cities of Africa, and also environmental challenges, climate resilience. So we look at issues of flooding, like we saw recently in South Africa and many other cities of Africa, the issue of water pollution and plan urbanization with many informal settlements. How do we come together as professionals and bring new solutions that will help our people to feel better in the urban spaces? So that's really where I am. And as a young CEO, I want to impact on policy making, on practitioners, on bringing up those ideas.
So your organization works pretty closely with communities on environmental planning and climate risk management. What does climate change actually look like on the ground in the communities that you're working in?
Yeah, so our recent work involved us working with Alexandra Water Warriors, a team of about 2,000 people coming together to clean the Jaske River. And this is an unprecedented movement in the continent when they come together, and they've been featured, Alexandra Water Warriors, in many magazines overseas. People are really appreciating what is happening. And we come as a technical partner to do what we call environmental impact assessment on the river, and also take some data to be able to promote and find finances. I think we'll talk about it later for these projects. So what is happening now is an awakening of young people, an awakening of the population, realizing that every year they go through the same struggle. The water will rise and people will die, and the river will get more and more dirtier, and all these things make that their daily life more and more difficult, despite all the needs that is coming from the state, from other NPOs. So us as a Chedza Environment Planning Solution, we bring this expertise that we've acquired through academic to really promote, but also write it down, keep all those changes that we're observing. So sustainability becomes then a key concept that we try to implement on the ground. And really what we see is the support of people, the community coming together through campaign, through workshop, learning about the environment and learning how to improve daily the river, but also the trees and everything that form part of the atmosphere there.
So one of the big themes of the Africa Summit is climate finance. And for many Africans, this sounds like a pretty complex technical concept. Simply put, though, what is climate finance and why does it matter for Africa?
Yeah, climate finance is pretty much the funds that are available for climate actions, the fight against climate change, which today can never be denied again. I mean, we've seen it over the years in many, many countries, and it is a reality. And when the countries of the world come together, like in the COP summit, some of the actions that are taken are being backed up by finances. So there are a number of organizations that's put some finance in place to be able to be used as a tool to implement those solutions. So it can seem complex because really there are very small organizations that are involved in the climate change fight against climate change in the world. But in reality, it is quite simple when you do know where to go and how to access this funding. I'm, for instance, myself a judge for the Commonwealth, and I know that there are also funds available there. So the key things is to have the information and to also go pursue these finance opportunities. And then not only at the international level, you do have municipal programs as well, environmental grant by the government that are available for organization. And it's very important for young people to know about it, not only young, but all those that are involved in climate change, and to be able to take actions and really profit about those climate change finances.
I think you've partly answered my next question, actually, and it's really about accessing this finance and these funds. What do you see has been some of the barriers preventing us from accessing these badly needed funds?
Yeah, I think the very first thing will be collaboration, very limited collaboration among stakeholders. And that, I won't give you the reason why, because I also don't know, probably maybe just a lack of opportunities. That's why we are very impressed and happy about the upcoming conference on African matters, so that we can come together, both leaders of the industries, policymakers, community actors. Everybody should come together, and we really need to have that, exchange of not only experience but information as well, knowledge sharing, and I think that will be one of the barriers that will uplift the quality or the access to this funding, but also scaling. I think what we've noticed is that there are very limited actions that are taken. I mean, it's very at a lower level. Just taking, for instance, the issue of food resilience, food security, that we are also engaged in, especially in urban spaces. What we've noticed is that there's some initiatives that we support as rooftop farming that are really limited in terms of funding, while there is international fund available for these rooftop farming to be able to have some, food within the urban space, and that we don't have to take it from very far, which the food will expire and all of that. So these initiatives are there. They are very small and they are scattered. So ideally, we would love more of these initiatives to be together, to be in partnership with many, many different stakeholders, and that will definitively unlock the potential of accessing those climate funds.
So beyond governments and international donors, what role do you think that African business, entrepreneurs and local innovators can play in financing climate adaptation and green solutions?
Yeah, I think beyond just those funds, it is important for professionals to really, not repeating myself, come together, but also promote new style, new ideas. I think innovation is very, very critical. We should not just look at what is happening in other part of the world, in other continents. We should really, as African, come and realize and then come together and decide what is good for us. We don't have to import solutions, and platforms are key then to come and discuss on how do we innovate in terms of those solutions that we are proposing or that we are promoting within our continent. So this is where project design and also monitoring is very, very important, and platform for showcasing those are also very, very important. So I would say that we need to come more together, but to also promote innovation as companies, as businesses, to really promote innovative solutions toward climate change and resilience.
You're part of a younger generation of African leaders working in this space of environmental sustainability. How important is it to have youth leadership right there at the forefront in shaping Africa's response to climate change?
It is critical. It is very important. You know, young people represent, I think, over 70% of the population in Africa in the future days. So it is important for young professionals to really be upfront, because the older generation, they've tried their best, but they probably haven't also come to the realization of the climate change today, which is our responsibility, because we live in it and we encounter what the climate has become and how the world is changing. So I think in many African cities, young people really need to stand and take responsibility, because no one else will do it if we do not. I think we've seen many billionaires coming from the Americas, especially, to come through the WFF, for instance, and pour funds to support the keeping of the forest in African Basin of Congo, and also to promote some of the park, keeping the wild animals in many of our places. But this remains, initiatives from the outside African people. Those are people that comes to realize that they have contributed to the destruction of our environment, and they want to bring back. But what do we as young people do then when we come to realize that? Do we just applaud and say, good, bring more funds? Or do we take do we become custodians of these funds and really implement solutions that will take our continent not only in the protection phase toward the environment, but also in the growth phase, because we should not also deny the fact that we're lagging behind in many things. So there need to be key entrepreneurs that look at both development and preservation, and this is a difficult things to do, to be honest with you. So we really need to come together and bring those ideas that will help us to do both at the same time.
All right, we're running out of time, so perhaps if you could answer this final question briefly. What are you hoping will come out of the Africa Matters Summit? What message would you like perhaps policymakers and African leaders to take away from this gathering?
Yeah, at this gathering, my expectations are pretty high, and I think that Platform Africa Matters is a valuable tool for all of us. So ideas, policy makers, and I really hope that there will be a real interaction. We've come to summit and we do talk, and there's often no follow-ups. So what I will really pledge to Channel Africa and all the partners that are involved in the Africa Matters is really to go beyond the simple event, but to ensure that there's a continuity toward action of all the deliverable that will be on that summit. Thank you.
Eliezer Goma, CEO of Chedza Enviro and Planning Solutions. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and I look forward to meeting you on the 25th.
Thank you, Peter.
And that's where we'll leave that. Don't forget, Africa Matters Summit taking place on the 25th in Johannesburg. But you can believe if you're in another part of the continent, out of town, you can also follow this online as well. We'll give you the details closer to the time. It's 8:30. It's time for your news headlines. Good morning, Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Immigrant rights advocates have filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the U.S. President Donald Trump's Trump's administration from next week, ending legal protections that allow nearly 1,100 Somalis to live and work in the United States. South Africa's Minister from Basic Education and Higher Education will answer oral questions in the National Council of Provinces today. This is as President Cyril Ramaphosa and various members of his executive will take part in an oral question session this week. And President Donald Trump says the U.S. and Israeli fighting with Iran is almost complete. He was speaking in his first news conference since the start of the hostilities in the Middle East. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Mtsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African perspective.
It's time now for our sports update. We say good morning to Musibudi Makura for that.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. A very good morning indeed from the sports desk. While Sri Lanka have appointed former South Africa as well as India coach Gary Kirsten on a 2-year deal following Sanath Jayasuriya's resignation after the team's early exit from the T20 World Cup. Now, Kirsten, who guided India to the 2011 World Cup title, will begin his tenure officially on the 15th of April as part of a wider revamp of Sri Lanka's high-performance centre. Sanath, one of the country's greatest cricketers, will remain involved as director of the centre, overseeing player development. Sri Lanka co-hosted the recent T20 World Cup but failed to progress beyond the Super 8s, sealing their exit after a defeat to the Black Caps of New Zealand. On to football news now. CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe has announced a $2 million increase in the prize money for the winner of the CAF Champions League and a further $2 million increase for the winner of the CAF Confederations Cup. Now, the winner of the CAF Champions League will receive $6 million, a 50% increase, while the winner of the CAF Confederations Cup will receive $4 million, a 100% increase. So in the last 5 years of Dr. Patrice Motsepe's leadership of CAF, the prize money for the winner of the CAF Champions League has increased from $2.5 million, which is a 140% increase, to now standing at $6 million. In the same period, the prize money for the winner of the CAF Confederation Cup increased from $1.2 to $4 million. The latest increases takes the overall prize money and payments to African football clubs to over $42 million per season, an increase of 23.4% since Dr. Motsepe was elected as the president of the Confederation of African Football. Further field now, Neymar will miss Santos' Brazilian Championship match against Mirassol on Tuesday with that lingering muscle fatigue, dealing a fresh blow to the forward's hopes of forcing his way back into Brazil's squad ahead of the FIFA World Cup. Now, Santos said Neymar's absence was precautionary, but the timing is awkward, with Brazil coach Carlo Ancelotti having organised a trip from Rio de Janeiro to Sao Paulo to watch the 34-year-old in action. Now, sources linked to the Brazilian Football Association as well as the national team's technical committee says Neymar's omission from Tuesday's match was met with a surprise as well as frustration from the federation as well as Ancelotti, who had hoped to assess the number 10 up close and personal. Ancelotti has made it clear that he will only select players who are fully fit and can meet Brazil's physical demands. Missing Tuesday's match could cost Neymar a place in the national team squad, being announced on the 16th of March for friendly matches against France and Croatia on the 26th as well as the 31st of March. On to tennis news now. Novak Djokovic clawed out a 6-4, 1-6, 6-4 victory over 72nd ranked American Alexander Kovacevic on Monday. This to reach the fourth round at Indian Wells for the first time since 2017. Djokovic, playing his first tournament since falling to Carlos Alcaraz at the Australian Open final in January, had all he could handle from the 27-year-old New Yorker, who peppered the Serbian superstar with 16 aces. Djokovic made an early eventually break stand up to take the first set, but the American had found his groove and rolled through the second set against a clearly frustrated Djokovic. Djokovic then regrouped in the final set before finding a break he needed in the final game of that encounter. And this is what he had to say after that win.
It was really anybody's game till the last game of the match, where he gave me some looks on the second serve and I used it. I used it, anticipated well, and one of the, I think, was 30-all or deuce, and kind of defended well and stayed patient and waited for his unforced error in the backhand and the last point. So overall, again, another physical battle, but obviously against the opponent that was playing on a high level. So I'm glad to overcome it. Can I play better? Yes. I'm very self-critical, but I'm just glad to win 2 matches in a row in Indian Wells.
Right, we'll stay with more tennis news. Britain's Emma Raducanu says she must be more aggressive if she is to compete with the world's best after suffering a heavy defeat at Indian Wells. The 2021 US Open champion was beaten 6-1 and 6-1 in just 52 minutes by American 6th seed Amanda Anisimova, who raced into the 4th round. Raducanu admitted that the golf in power and short weight left her feeling a little bit behind, and also stressed she needs to mix her game up and rediscover her natural style. Having recently enlisted Mark Petchey as a temporary coach, Raducanu insists that she's now focused on building momentum despite the setback, pointing to positives from her earlier win over Anastasia Zakharova. That's a wrap from the sports desk at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email. That's to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Coming up on Rise and Shine, we look at the South African Civil Society Alliance Union Against Hunger and how they've welcomed upcoming hearings by the South African Human Rights Commission on hunger. This starting on 12 March at the Nelson Mandela Foundation in Johannesburg. Stay tuned for that.
Africa Matters. The conversation on climate change and financing Africa's recovery. Only on Channel Africa.
We're proud to announce that Wits Business School is actually our partner. They are hosting us. The second most important thing, though, for me, is that we often go to these summits, these conferences, and you find that you never really know where to find solutions and outcomes that came out of those discussions. So Wits Business School will craft our outcomes document, which will have steps to say what are the follow-ups and how do we measure success and what do we need to do next.
Across the continent, climate change is forcing tough decisions. This is Africa Matters.
It's time now for our business news, and we say good morning to Chanduko Ligege for that update.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Money laundering and the financing of terrorism remain pressing concerns in the Southern African Development Community region, the SADC, prompting member states to step up their efforts. Central banks have responded by forging bilateral and multilateral agreements aimed at enhancing regional financial integration, payment systems and monetary stability. In a recent development, the Bank of Namibia and the South African Reserve Bank signed a revised memorandum of understanding to strengthen institutional cooperation. Spokesperson for the South African Reserve Bank, Yolanda Vacha, elaborates on the MOUs and bilateral agreements with various central banks in the SADC region.
And so the MOUs are then entered into bilaterally with various central banks in the region, depending on the need as well as, the topics of interest at the time. So some MOUs that we have with central banks would be about 10 years old. Some would be maybe even older than that. And from time to time, we then look at the MOUs and we update the agreements based on emerging topics such as, payments, anti-money laundering, as well as, resolution.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his Brazilian counterpart, President Lula da Silva, have called for an increase in trade between the two countries. Ramaphosa is visiting the country following his trip to the U.S. He says that the two countries needed to work on increasing the number of companies doing business in each other's country.
This visit presents us with an opportunity to, in many ways, reimagine a world of opportunities which is anchored by shared values and a clear vision. As Team South Africa, we are keen to rebalance our trade by growing and diversifying South African export or trade with Brazil.
The Motor Industry Staff Association, MESA, has expressed concern over the latest motor vehicle recalls, saying that the frequent incidents are deeply concerning. This follows Volkswagen South Africa's recall of over 25,700 VW Polo vehicles sold between February 2025 and February this year to correct handbrake fittings. Last year, VW recalled more than 250 Polo sedan vehicles due to an incorrectly fitted seat belt on the driver's side. MESA spokesperson is Phakamile Hlubimajola.
MESA is deeply concerned about the sharp increase in vehicle recalls in recent years. While we understand the complex factors driving these recalls, we cannot ignore the impact they have on consumer confidence and, importantly, on the credibility of dealerships and sales executives. These workers, who are at the front lines of customer engagement, bear the brunt of consumer frustration despite having no control over the manufacturing processes or the components that lead to recalls.
The Egyptian Petroleum Ministry says the country has raised prices on a wide range of fuel products. This as the region continues to reel from rising global oil and gas prices and the disruption of Middle East output from the US-Israeli war on Iran. The decision comes days after Egypt Prime Minister Mustafa Modboli said in a press conference earlier this month that the state might resort to measures if global fuel prices rise significantly because of the war. Meanwhile, oil prices have stabilized and stock markets have showed signs of resilience. This follows U.S. President Donald Trump's reassurances regarding the ongoing fighting in the Middle East. The price of oil has fallen markedly from yesterday's dramatic high. Here is BBC's Simon Jack.
The price of a barrel of oil smashed through $100 at one point to nearly $120, the highest level seen since 2022. Reports that G7 countries were considering releasing hundreds of millions of barrels of oil from emergency reserves helped push prices down later in the day to just under $100, despite no decision being taken. But prices are still nearly 50% higher than before the US and Israeli attack on Iran and retaliatory strikes on the oil and gas infrastructure of other Gulf states.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 394, Botswana 13 pula 44, Kenya 128 shilling 31, Zambia 19 kwacha 208. BRICS countries $1 in Brazil 5 trill 24, Russia 78 ruble 79, India 92 rupee 14, China 61 91, South Africa 16 rand 65 cents. $1 is 75 pence to the British pound, 86 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $5,169, platinum at $2,188 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $92.88 a barrel. That's all for now. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email, newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's a little shy of 8:45 Central African time. A new report has raised concerns about widespread fraud in South Africa's public school admissions system, with some parents allegedly submitting false information to secure places at high-demand schools. According to the Tenant Profile Network, or TPN, Credit Bureau, schools have reported cases where applicants provided misleading addresses or falsified documents to meet feeder zone requirements. Education stakeholders warn that the practice undermines fair access to schooling and places additional pressure on already oversubscribed institutions. Our reporter Lebuchang Mabange has more.
A report by the Tenant Profile Network has uncovered a troubling pattern of fraudulent applications during the school admissions process. Schools have reported cases where parents allegedly submit falsified documents in an attempt to secure placements for their children at high-demand institutions. Ashley Laurent is the legal counsel at TPN Credit Bureau.
What schools had indicated was that there were reports of doctored municipal bills, often generic proof of residence letters issued without verification, or fabricated lease agreements. They'd also indicated that when performing door-to-door checks, the individual may not have necessarily resided there, despite stating so in their application. So these were the most common types of fraud that we would see as indicated by schools.
Education stakeholders say the issue is particularly prevalent at high-performing schools where the demand for placement far exceeds the available space. The Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools says its member schools have increasingly reported such cases. Dr. Jaco Deacon, Chief Executive Officer of FEDSAS, explains.
FEDSAS is concerned about a growing number of cases where parents submit false or misleading residential information during the admissions process. Over a number of years, our member schools have reported instances of doctored municipal accounts, fabricated lease agreements, or generic proof of residence letters that cannot be verified. This problem tends to occur particularly at well-performing schools where the demand for places exceed the available capacity. In some verification exercises conducted by our member schools, very high levels of inaccurate address information were detected. Because of the growing nature of this problem, FEDSAS supported the amendment to the SA Schools Act, which introduced Section 59.3.
Dr. Deacon says addressing the issue will require stronger verification systems as well as greater cooperation between schools and provincial education departments.
I think a combination of stronger verification processes and clear accountability is needed. It's both. So schools are already carrying a significant administrative burden to verify the different documentation. And now this may involve scrutinizing documentation, cross-checking addresses, and in some instances physically verifying the school address. The responsibility usually falls on the school governing body, but they will dedicate it to the management of the school. At the same time, where provincial departments run centralized online admission systems, there's obligation on the department to help to verify the process. In one province, the Northern Cape, the schools only see the application after the system approved them to be admitted to specific schools, which limits the school's ability to detect fraud, and that should be addressed.
The Credit Bureau also cautions that while some applications may contain inaccurate information, not all cases necessarily involve deliberate fraud.
It's imperative to note that some cases clearly involve inaccurate information, but it's important not to assume intent in every situation. What the data does show is that the system is under pressure and that strong verification processes are needed to ensure admissions remain fair. If, of course, a parent deliberately misleaded the school, they or submits false information, they put themselves at risk of rejection, cancellation of admission after placement, and criminal liability as cited in the Act.
Education stakeholders are urging parents to submit accurate information during the admissions process, warning that falsifying documents could lead to rejected applications, cancelled placements, or even criminal charges under the amended Schools Act. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebuchang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So in 10 minutes' time, you will be in the company of Benjamin and Palesa, and they're going to be running the award-winning show On the Move. And Benjamin is here to tell us what we can look forward to. Hello, Brother Benjamin.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good morning. Good, and you?
Fantastic, man. All right, today, I always pick one thing because I like the conversations that I have with you on these topics that are coming up. And I sometimes use some of the concerns we have around the questions that we're asking, and I add them to the questions that we add to our guests. Well, today, I'm going to focus on our In the Cubicle feature, which is our career feature. Today, I'm going to be speaking about pivoting. Pivoting in your career. Okay. Does pivoting mean that you go completely different, or do you find something nuanced to your experience? And also, what is the choice that leads to that final decision to say, you know what, I need to pivot right now?
That is fascinating. I've pivoted a few times.
You are an actor. I was a big fan of Zulu and My Stupid.
I started my working life as an auditor.
Really?
And then I worked in finance as a group accountant.
Wow.
And then got into marketing and advertising.
Wow, that's dramatic pivoting all the time.
And then broadcasting. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, let's speak about the pivoting from the kind of more administrative focused jobs that you did to this world of broadcasting. What led to that big shift?
So I think what happens with most people is your first line of work is probably not your first choice, but one that might have been influenced either by your parents or your peer groups, and you think that you should be doing this profession. Somewhere along the line, you start to find your passions, and then you can have a moment where you say, am I brave enough to give up what I'm doing?
Sure.
And do something else that might be less secure, less recognized? Because from a group accountant to a TV presenter,
it's a downgrade.
My father was traumatized.
Aren't you still traumatized with the experiences we face?
Life changes as well can make that pivot happen. Because when I was doing broadcasting first, and then I switched to agriculture.
Oh yes,
it was because I'd moved from Gauteng to Northwest.
Okay,
and that was a thing to do for us at that time, with the family farm just sitting there, and the broadcasting industry is like non-existent in the Northwest. And then, but I came back to this. So also life changes, moves, and people dying and things like that can also result in a pivot.
Okay.
Yeah, so different things there to look at.
All right, I'm going to use both of your scenarios and they're going to formulate parts of my questioning. Thank you guys for the content.
All right, we look forward to that conversation coming up a little bit later on.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So, millions of people across Africa continue to face food insecurity, despite the continent producing significant amounts of food. In South Africa, one of the continent's most industrialized economies, hunger and malnutrition remains a serious concern, particularly amongst young children. Now, the South African Human Rights Commission will begin a national investigative hearings on the country's food system on the 12th of March in Johannesburg. And this inquiry will examine whether government, businesses and other stakeholders are doing enough to ensure that people have access to affordable, nutritious food. Civil society organizations have welcomed the hearings, but say that key players in the food system, including major food producers and retailers, must also be held accountable if meaningful change is to happen. Well, to discuss this further, we're now joined by Nzama Mbalatu, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Healthy Living Alliance, or HEALA. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter, and Channel Africa listeners. Thank you for having us.
So, the Union Against Hunger has welcomed these hearings by the South African Human Rights Commission. Why are these hearings so important, do you think, at this moment in time in South Africa?
Very, very important inquiries in terms of having the whole of society making an input in terms of what is causing hunger and malnutrition and stunting in this country, and why is the food system, South Africa is a country of plenty, why is the food system leaving many people hungry, particularly the poor and vulnerable, including children? And why are we still having, 11,000 children dying every year because of not having adequate, food and macronutrients? And why are we having 29% of the children population in South Africa being stunted? So it's a very, very important conversation to bring equity in the food system and ensuring that everyone can have access to food.
So, some might say that South Africa is the most developed nation on the continent, and we have these contradictions that you've described. We have plenty on the one hand, and yet a lack on the other. What's your view in terms of why we're here?
So it's a couple of things. This include policy failures and policy implementation failures from policy and decision makers. We have to say 30 years into democracy, it's unacceptable for the state as a whole to meet its obligations. So the state, we're including everyone that is part of state, not just government, of not meeting the constitutional obligation, which is stating that every child has a right to have access to nutrition, and that right is not quantified in terms of children. There are no limitations to that right, and that adults should have a right to have access to adequate food. So it's policy failures. It's how the food system has been skewed and scrupulous to more profit making. There are also monopolies in the food system, in terms of who controls the food system and the supply chains in the food system. So big role players can produce food, or they can process food and then ship it out of the country, and so the people who are shaping food system actually has a stake in terms of where people live, their status in society, when you are poor or rich, you will not have access, or have access therefore. So it's really failures, nothing more than I can quantify, rather than it has been failure from our side as a state, collective as a state, to make provision for the right to food as enshrined in the Constitution.
So, very briefly, what do you want to come out of these hearings as maybe concrete action plans going forward?
I think most important, Peter, and the listeners, is the concrete action forward. What we want, I think we know these problems that we have. It's fine that we're galvanizing this and getting together to talk more, and it's to have a yardstick in terms of who's accountable. Is to have accountability mechanism, whether it's government, whether it's civil society, whether it's the private sector, or corporates, big food and beverage manufacturers, whether it's big, farmers. So we need to make sure that there is a clear yardstick in terms of who's accountable and how we're going to measure progress and success. We must not just produce another report for academic purposes.
Zama, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you so much indeed, and let's hope that these hearings do yield the fruit that's badly required. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much.
That's Nzama Mbalati, the Chief Executive Officer of the Healthy Living Alliance, talking about these all-important hearings that are going to be taking place in terms of why there's so many people hungry in South Africa, a country that's certainly not poor.
And that's how we end the show on this Tuesday, the 10th of March's edition. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m. And that's goodbye then. From me, Asanda Beda.
And from me, Peter Ndoro. And On the Move is next.
The voice of the continent, now online, with all your sports fixtures, lifestyle, and more.
All right, thanks to Peter and Asanda for getting us going. 3 hours of making sure that we're updated on what's happening on the continent and beyond. But right now it's 900 hours Central African time. Let's get the latest news.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Benjamin. Looking at your top stories, immigrant rights advocate file lawsuit